Looking for a good spot with background that's got some infinity focus, not too much clutter, and in direct sun. That is also within range of running a stinger off the inverter on the van. So this looks pretty good. And where is the sun? Sun is frontal. So let's start with the easy up. Can you run that stinger from the inverter and power up the inverter? I've had some equipment manufacturers reach out and offer to send me gear to review, but most of them I've just been too busy on the road and don't have time, and they haven't been a piece of equipment I would purchase for my own use. So I want to limit it to things that I would actually use. So Zhiyun contacted me, sent to me their Molus G300 chip on board light. It's bi-color. It's got a nice little power supply. I like the industrial design where the fans are the same. It's pretty slick, and it's like a heavy duty plastic, some metal. I think these will be a good upgrade for me from my existing 300 cob lights that are daylight only. I think this is going to be bright enough, even though it's bicolor, to work out in the sun in daylight mode. So I thought the first good test for my application would be typical TV news stand-up live shot with a correspondent. We're here in South Texas in August, so it's one of the brightest months of the year. It's 9 a.m., it's already 90 degrees. It got up to 113 yesterday, so we're gonna knock this out before it gets unbearably hot. So, as is typical when I'm doing live shots, typically park the van close to the set, and I'm running this light off the inverter in the van. I have a 400 amp hour lithium battery in the truck and a 1,000 watt inverter, so I should have no problem powering a 300 light. And we'll try this 3 different ways. First up, the way it's shipped, which is with this Bowens mount intensifier. And I've got the easy up to cut the sun, which is frontal, although we are getting some skipping off the pavement. But you can see here, he's quite a bit under the sunlit background. So when I do these daytime exterior stand-ups, the first thing I do is frame up my shot and set my desired exposure for the background. And then I bring up my foreground lighting to match the background. So we'll start out here, power this thing up. I've got 5600 and the dimmer is set to 30%. We'll take a look on camera. And he's still a little under, but we're pretty close at 30%. And this light is about 6 feet away from the subject. So let's try 40%. Take a look at my zebras. We're still a little under. Let's go 50. 50%, we're almost there. I'm going to walk the light in a little bit. Oh, there we go. That looks like that's about right. Boy, still not getting zebra on his face. Getting pretty squinty, huh? Okay, I'm going to elevate the light up for eyeline. Once you lose your hat, because we wouldn't have a hat on for a stand-up, but I might for an interview. There we go. Okay, so with the intensifier, we had to go a full 100%, and I pushed the light in. It's probably, I'd say 5 feet away from the subject. And we came up a little bit because of the squint factor looking into the lens. Got to get the light higher than the optical height. Okay, so to get proper exposure to match the sunlight, I had to push the light into about 5 feet away, and we're at a full 100%, 5600 only. And I elevated the light up a little higher so it's not so squinty for the talent looking into the camera. Next up, I'd like to try a Fresnel lens, which is my preferred way to do these stand-ups. I like the shadow quality from the Fresnel, and then the Fresnel's also got some spot floodability, so I can narrow the beam and intensify a bit on the face. Working through this edit, I'm amazed by how much better the iPhone levels are on faces versus the FX9. Obviously still getting the lighting dialed in, but man, it just like high-end camera versus the iPhone. And in this case, the iPhone looks better. I'm finding this more and more shooting news and real-time content with no take two. Quite often, the best shot I'm getting is on my iPhone, not the expensive camera and lenses. But I wonder what Apple is doing here. They must be some kind of backlight and image correction going on to bring up the levels. The FX9, Beck's face, that's what it looked like to me in person. He was shadowed and backlit, and obviously that is not the case on the iPhone. I mean, it looks lit and ready to go. Amazing. The spec that piqued my interest on this light is its size. It's significantly shorter than my current Cobb lights, and space is at a premium in the van. So if I can downsize to a smaller light, that means I can carry more equipment. And for airline travel, I don't generally fly with my existing Cobb lights because they're too big, but this I would have no problem slotting in a Pelican 1615 with some other kit. Okay, Fresnel lens at full flood, 100% on the dimmer. It's a little under. Next, I'm going to spot in a little bit. Let's go in like a halfway. Needs to tilt up a little bit. Halfway, half spot at 100%, looks about right. And the fans just started running, but they're quiet. I don't hear them at all at the camera's position. Let me stand over by Talent. And yeah, the ambient traffic noise is way above the level of the fan. It's a non-issue. Last up, while it's way too bright today, I still want to try a softbox. For outside broadcasts, it's rare with any light source that you can run softboxes in direct sun. But every once in a while, wintertime, or if I'm in a city with high rises and we're working in shaded areas and shaded backgrounds, I can put the softbox on. But I'm curious at 100%, 5600, if I can put the softbox as close as possible on the edge of frame and see if we can get a usable exposure in direct sun. Okay, so that is the softbox at 100% at the same distance of about 5 feet. And now I'm going to wheel in and to the side, check my frame. And yeah, even with the light in frame, no surprise there. It's not bright enough. Even if I had a second one on the fill side, I have that same issue with my 300 daylight only lights, which are going to be a little bit brighter because they're not bicolor, but they still don't have enough punch to compete with the sun when you add a softbox to the mix. Okay, one additional test. There is a mode where you can go into max extreme mode, which gets you 500 watts by pressing and holding the dimmer and color temp buttons at the same time. Yeah, I see it says CCT max. Okay, so it drops down to 300 Kelvin. And we're at 100% on the dimmer. So let's see what that looks like on camera with the softbox. Obviously warmer, but we could adjust the white balance, maybe pick something in between the 5700 Kelvin background and the foreground. But yeah, it's certainly brighter, but in the softbox, doesn't have enough punch, but that's not a limitation in my mind. It's gonna have the same issue with any light from any manufacturer. It's just not a big enough instrument in a softbox in the sun. Each of these cameras is set to a different frame rate, resolution, codec, white balance, ISO. They're all at whatever they were left at from their previous shoots, and they didn't all work on the same jobs at the same times. So first up, I don't have matching lenses, so we'll shoot everything at a 50 mil, doing the best with what I can have here. We'll do everything full frame. FX3 will have a 28 to 135 at 50 mil. We're gonna shoot an F4. Burano is a 50 mil prime, Sigma Art Series, F4. And then the two FX9s are 28 to 135s, which have a maximum aperture of F4. That's the reason I'm gonna do everything at a 4. And then I've got a window in the background, but I think it'll be dark by the time we get up and going. So maybe we'll look at that again tomorrow if I have time. Next up, I need to load settings into each camera so they all match. To simulate a typical corporate interview job, I'm gonna run all of these in S-Log3, S-Gamut3 Cine, in UHD, and we'll do, for the sake of the vlog, my iPhone here is 2997, so I'll run all the cameras also at 29. And to speed things along, I've got the common settings for the type of work I do saved as user profiles in each camera under all file on the FX9s. File load. So let's see, I've got a log. I should make a few more of these for log 1080, log 2997, log 2398. About a year and a half ago, I was on a shoot with a director DP from California, Mike Kirsch. Hey Mike. Mike and I have worked together for a long time, way back when I was still based in California. And he had a shoot here in Texas, and he brought his FX3. I'm trying to remember now. I think we had his FX3 and one of my FX9s. We were shooting UHD in log mode, and the default Sony 709 LUT in the FX9 was not a perfect or a super close match with the default LUT in the FX3. And Mike gave me a different LUT to load in both cameras, and it got our skin tones to match, as well as the corporate branding yellow color in the background. With the default LUTs, we could get the skin tones to match at the expense by adjusting white tint in the white balance. It would throw the corporate branding yellow off, or we could get the yellow right and then the skin tones didn't quite match. And this other LUT, which came off the Sony website as well, I'll put the notes in the description, that I've been using ever since to match my FX3 to the 9. So I just loaded that same LUT onto the Burano's SD card, and I'm going to load that in as a base look. Import from SD, and I think I can just put that right here on number 1. We stopped for dinner and the sun is set, so changed up the background. This is another common corporate look. Color wash, let's assume that's the company branded color, and we have to get the shade of blue correct on all the cameras, as well as having skin tones match. So I've got all the cameras rolling. To recap, the FX9s are in UHD, the Burano and FX3 are in 1080. And there are two approaches to color matching nowadays. In the old days, you used to have to bust out the paint box and get into the matrix and shade each camera differently to get them to visually look the same. You couldn't just match all the numerical numbers in the menus. They just didn't look, every camera looks different, every lens looks a little different. That's far less the case nowadays. So to start out, I've got all the cameras set to my key light color temp, which is 5600, 0 tint on everything. And then I've got a quad split record rolling also to compare. It's a ProRes file. And first up, I'm looking, the FX3 is framed a little wider, and that's because I realize now the way we position the cameras, the sensor is a little bit further away than the big cameras, even though they're all 50 mil. So that does make the FX3 look like the background is darker, but I don't think it is. It's just that it's seeing a wider to frame left. But this looks great to me. This would work for every kind of job I do. I have yet to shoot raw on the Burano. In the old days, for me, gosh, over 10 years ago, shooting red, certainly did a bunch of raw, but I don't have any clients demanding that. I'm all either cine tone or log. It's probably about 50-50 job to job. So yeah, these look great. So now I'm curious if we do a different white balance approach, which is to shoot an auto white balance off a white card with the same light source and see if I get a closer match or if things drift a bit. So I found when I have different brand and vintage lenses, like maybe I've got a proper PL $40,000 cinema zoom on one camera and my B angle is just stills glass, $2,300 lens. Canon versus Sony, they're gonna render a little different. So in those cases, you may not always get the best match having all of the cameras set to just presets of 5600, and the tints will be a little different. Just looking at the monitor now, let me hit record again on all the cameras so we can compare in the edit. But referring to the Flanders, the Burano looks cooler than the other three, and the FX3 looks the most green and a little bit warmer. So now I'm curious, first we'll white balance, auto white balance FX9A, and it goes from 5600 to 5206 and a tint of -6. And then next up, FX9B, that came out at 5110 and a -2 tint. Now the Burano, 5415 -11, and the FX3, it's a little different here. We're gonna go white balance, custom number 1, and I don't know if it'll let me set it while it's rolling. No, I'm going to cut the camera for a sec. And white balance, custom 1. Set. Roll the camera. Yeah, capture. And it came out at 4800K, no tint. Function currently disabled. Okay, roll. Yeah, 4800 Kelvin. All right, so let's go back to the monitor and look. And yeah, now to me, much closer match all around. All right, Beck, let's see your face. So just looking at a live picture, I was happy with the 5600 preset on all the cameras, but my standard workflow is to always shoot an auto white balance on a white card with the cameras side by side.
Now I turn to you, the viewers, to help me out. I've been out of the post-production world professionally for over a decade. The only things I edit or mildly color is content for this blog. So I have a couple of LUTs questions if you know the answers or have a better advice for workflow. I know I should be using Resolve. I was running Resolve with the Red 1. I had a Red Rocket card and a souped up Mac Pro workstation with an NVIDIA graphics card so I could do real-time coloring to R3D files. It was super fun. I loved it, but that's kind of where it ended. When I switched over to RE cameras, I just went to this shooting log and providing LUTs wrapped in with the footage, and I didn't have to color anything anymore. It was wonderful. But now, man, the tools have gotten so good just here on a MacBook. I brought this footage into FCP. The two FX9 cameras and the Burano are log footage, but they've got the LUT attached. However, it's the default Sony S-Log3S Gamut 3.Cine. Even though in the menus I selected a custom LUT to output on the monitor path, how do I make that custom LUT ride with each clip? For years shooting on Amura's and Alexa's, whatever LUT I selected in camera would be the one that would be embedded as metadata in the MOV files. I'm sure there's a way, I just don't know how to do it. So with that said, the first thing I had to do was switch over to my custom LUT in FCP, which is not custom, it's just the type A LUT from Sony. And the reason I'm running this LUT is, let's do a comparison between FX9A and B. Oh, and then the FX3 doesn't have a LUT attached. I don't know why. So let's, FX9 B cam, I'm going to change that to the type A LUT. And then we'll switch over to my main timeline, where, let's make this a little bit larger. So what is that, 3 and 4? Yeah. So you can see this is the default Sony S-Gamut 3.Cine. It's more like video broadcast camera colors, very saturated electronic blues. And the Type A looks more to me like what I was seeing with my own eyes on set. The colors are a little, you can see it's more of a cyan and less of a deep blue. And this is what we ran into on that job I did about a year and a half ago, where we had the corporate brand color as a specific shade of yellow, and it wasn't coming through as the right, obviously the yellow with the default LUT, but and it looked a little bit different on the FX9 versus the FX3 with that default LUT. And when we switched all of the cameras over to Type A, everything lined up and looked beautiful. I'm not doing any coloring on the post side. This is the footage we're handing over. It's ready to edit, ready to deliver, and they can certainly play with the contrast and treat things for a creative look, but I'm giving them technically accurate, pleasing color on brand. In the multicam clip, I'm going to switch all of my log cameras over to the Type A LUTs. Burano Type A, FX3 Type A. See, the FX3 is different. I wish the framing were closer. I think the FX3 is just a little underexposed, and that's why it looks so different. Maybe it's got a little bit more green tint in it, but in the context of a real project, I'm not going to have obviously multiple cameras framed very similar. It's going to be like a wide and a close, or a profile and a medium, or it's multiple guests on camera and I'm switching between two different subjects. So in each of those scenarios, I mean, these match so incredibly close compared to 15, 20 years ago shooting on broadcast cameras like Betacam, the 400As or the 600Ds, the same model cameras, and even painted, there would be bigger discrepancies than what I'm seeing between the Burano and the FX3. And let's do one last click through FX9A and B. There's FX9A, FX9B. Lost the buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4. A, B, A, B. And now let's go between A and the Burano. Burano, A, Burano, A, Burano, B, Burano, B. Yeah, they're a little different. But again, in the context of an actual show, no viewer is going to discern the subtle differences in skin tones. And the blue looks the same to me. And again, maybe that Burano is slightly more green, or the FX9 has a little more magenta. I think that could just be a quick tint shift in post if I wanted to obsess about it. But no, looks fantastic. And let's just go back to the quad. This was the monitor path, the Flanders monitor with a quad split box. So each camera outputting the Type A LUT internally compared to the LUT applied on the timeline when we go full frame. In next week's vlog, we'll dive into some of the QuickBooks data from my freelancing business as an owner-operator. This is 2024 revenue by month in the accrual basis, which means when I generated the invoice, not when I got paid. And sometimes I'm late to invoice on some jobs. I just get busy on the next thing and the next thing, and it'll take me 2, sometimes 3, even 4 weeks to generate the invoice. And then other jobs, I'm generating the invoice up front before we start. So that skews the data a bit, but one consistency is a slow August or a slow July. Those sort of trade out. But I want to overlay these and see how accurate my memory is relative to the hard numbers. We'll get into that next week. Thanks for watching.